I'm your host, Winifred Adams, and you're listening to Making Life Brighter. And I'd like to welcome you all to today's amazing show. This is part one of a special two-part series that I've been eager to share with you for some time. I have the honor of welcoming a very special guest. When he's not at church and volunteering, helping others, and spending time doing jiu-jitsu with his family, he is known the world over, and I mean the world over, as the official historian of the Bitcoin Civil War. He is one of the authors at CoinGeek, and he is someone that is heavily involved in mining in the cryptocurrency world, if we can call it crypto at all, and we'll get into that in this show. And he is the CEO of Gorilla Pool. It's my pleasure and my honor to sit down with this very interesting man, Mr. Kurt Wuckert, Jr. And you can find him and consult with him even on his websites. You can find him on every social media platform just about. And he is also on live stream weekly. So you'll definitely want to catch that. But you can go to CoinGeek.com. You can go to GorillaPool.com. You can look up Kurt Wuckert Jr. And you can check out all of the places that he is sharing his wealth of knowledge. And today he's come here to share his wealth of knowledge on the two sides of the controversial Bitcoin. And the Bitcoin debate is seated in what is sort of old school DS kind of operational function versus new, clean, and forward thinking operational function. So what's the difference? How does it matter to you? How will it affect our economy as we go forward and our way of doing commerce? So check out this two-part series today, and please welcome Mr. Kurt Wuckert.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for listening to Making Life Brighter. And as promised, I have a very special guest today. I'm excited to have this interview. I'm really excited to bring this very special historian to the table because, as you know, here on Making Life Brighter, we love to focus on history. And we like to focus on banking and where we're headed into the quantum and where that's going to take us under contract and the usuries that we have and how that is properly backed or not backed. So today we have one of the chief historians of Bitcoin with us. And it's my honor to welcome Mr. Kurt Wuckert Jr. Welcome, Kurt. Nice to have you here with us. Thank you for being on Making Life Brighter today.
Thank you so much. I'm really looking forward to our talk.
Well, you are known as the historian of Bitcoin. So let's jump into this because there's a lot of controversy going on about the Satoshi trial, about Bitcoin in general. And so many people say, oh my gosh, it's not good. It's not going to sustain. I think we need some help understanding where the division happened, where the war began, and maybe the good versus the bad. Can you help spell that out for us?
That could be a 2-hour response, truly. So actually, it could be a PhD level discourse response, frankly. But there's
how did you get into it? How did you start with this?
Kind of by accident. So I was an activist and a businessman. I always tell everybody, if somebody is only an activist, if that's their primary means of living their lives, like be a little like that's not a good way to live your life. But I've always been an entrepreneur. I love business. I love the idea of building things. For me, it's like a game. Like, can I build a successful business over here, and then can my side hustle make me $1 million? Like that kind of thing. And so I like to do stuff. It might be, a pituitary gland issue or something, but I wake up in the morning and just say like, all right, what can I learn? What can I do? How can I conquer this next thing?
I love your generation. I have to say, this is what's so exciting to me, honestly, because you are considered like one of those super geeky people, hence CoinGeek pulling you in, and Gorilla Pool, and all these businesses that you're running, which we'll get into in just a second. But the get up and how do I contribute or how do I create today is what we need in this world. So my hat's off to you.
I appreciate it. So I'll keep it pretty brief. I got into Bitcoin. I owned a printing company, and I was also ghostwriting for a libertarian magazine. And I just so happened to be going to an End the Fed rally circa 2012. And I'm from Chicago, so it was in that era when that kind of thing. It was a little bit post Occupy Wall Street, and that kind of stuff was going on. And I had a friend say, "Hey, this thing's coming up in about a week. Can you print me some posters?" Which was great. I got business from the Liberty community quite a bit. And this guy said, "And can I pay you in Bitcoin?" And I didn't know what Bitcoin was, so I had to ask. And the first thing he told me is, "Well, it's like video game money." And my first question, and in hindsight, it's very dumb. I said, "Which video game?" And he said, "No, not for a specific video game." He's like, "Think about if there was a currency that you could use across all video games." I was like, "Okay, that's novel." And that was about it. So I said yes. It was a relatively small job, and he paid me something like 2 or 3 Bitcoins for like $150 project, because Bitcoin was worth 40 or $50 at the time. So that was my first little bit, and I kind of ignored it for another 6 months. My brother got offered a job working for another sort of liberty-minded podcaster, a guy by the name of Adam Kokesh. And part of the stipulation was you have to be paid in Bitcoin. And so it was the second time I had heard of Bitcoin, and both from people in the hard liberty movement. I said, okay, I guess I better learn what this is about. And for me, I'm always about don't learn about where we are, always learn fundamentals. So for me, I'm quite a religious Christian, but for me, I'm not just going to go pick out an English Bible. I'm the guy who's going to go learn like Koine Greek, and then have my double concordance, and like, okay, how, like, so this is how I learn things, because I'm always suspicious of translation and zeitgeist, and here's what the culture says about X. And so I went down the Bitcoin rabbit hole. I read every word Satoshi Nakamoto, wearing a Satoshi shirt today. Satoshi Nakamoto, the creator of Bitcoin, every word he ever said. We were very blessed that he spent about 2 years just having public conversations with people. So people would simply ask, like, well, what if the network is attacked in this clever way? And then what if it, all these other things? How do we scale? How does it become money? How does it replace gold as the reserve asset? How does, and Satoshi was kind enough to give very thorough answers to these questions. And so for anybody with the patience to read 2 years of long form forum discussions, you can actually see inside of the mind of the architect of Bitcoin. And so I committed myself to that. And it wasn't for any reason other than to know. And then as the Bitcoin Civil War started to heat up, this is now 2 or 3 years later, like 2015, 16, 17, it really bothered me seeing sort of this new group of people, the new people that are all of a sudden in positions of power, and they're influencers, and they've got a big podcast and all this stuff. I'm like, who are you people? I've been here for a few years, and all of a sudden you're this big thing, and you're saying stuff that I know to be false. And so
can I just interrupt you really quickly right there for the audience's sake? Can you define, going back to Satoshi and Craig Wright and everything, can you define Bitcoin's definition? It's not a currency, or it is a currency, or what is it technically?
So Bitcoin is a sort of a hybrid asset in a lot of ways. It is attempting to be a peer-to-peer digital cash. So cash meaning, liquid physical currency. I give you $5, you give me a sandwich, right? Like that is one of its basic functions, but it also has the properties of a commodity money, in that it is like gold. It can't change. It doesn't matter how much you hate it or want to resist it. It is an unchanging asset. It also has a known, knowable, and finite supply. So gold is sort of like that. We don't know how much gold there is in the universe, and it's possible a meteor drops out of the sky that's the size of a school bus and made out of pure gold, and then now the global gold supply has been diluted. So there's edge cases like that where gold is, not totally auditable of how much there is in circulation. But Bitcoin has a hard cap. We know there's 21 million Bitcoins. They're subdivided into 100 million sats each. So there's actually 2.1 quadrillion individual units that can be transacted over this ledger. So it has the properties of sound money, hard money, and cash.
Is it a
And
cryptocurrency?
kind of.
Not by definition, though, correct?
So I actually I hate that term, because that term it's sort of like saying, is this person a liberal? And that's a very different answer in 2024 than it would have been in, say, 1915 or something. It just, like, there are connotations that go with the word that are unclear. In a very broad sense, kind of, Bitcoin is kind of a cryptocurrency in that it uses cryptography to make a signature on a distributed ledger in order to transact currency. In that sense, yes. The reason I would say no is that it is primarily a commodity, and that the word crypto, so here we're going to get into the Greek. So
let's go.
Crypto means secret or to hide, essentially. Kryptos is the word that is being used there. And it means something that is not revealed. It's hidden. Well, Bitcoin is not hidden in any way. It is a global public ledger. Anyone can see the state of every single Bitcoin on the ledger. So that is for the purpose of audit. So it is the exact opposite of hidden anything. So that's my first criticism. Now, it's also not really a currency in the sort of textbook macroeconomic monetary theory sense. It's not exactly a currency. It's a cash, which is like a currency in many ways, but currency tends to be about the issuer of the currency being a specific type of entity, and it's not. The currency is sort of emergent, or the cash is emergent, but it's the product of proof of work, just like how gold can be a currency, but if you go dig gold out of the ground, it is not fundamentally currency, right? So
okay, wait, hold on right there, because I don't want to interrupt you. You're on such a great thing, but I am going to break it down a little further. So if we go to more, and I'm serious, let's go to the atomic level. If we go right down to the atomic level, can that be quantified in this? And is that then quantified in Bitcoin? Because gold can be atomically quantified.
So that's kind of the point. You take a gold coin to a numismatic shop, and it's stamped 18 karat gold, but is it, right? And so there's a chemical process you can go through and determine what is the purity atomically of this gold. With Bitcoin, there's a couple ways to do that. You can actually run your own piece of software that can look at the moment this individual token that you are holding in your hand came into existence. You can see every single signature of exchange from when it moved, from the time it was mined until the time it has entered your hands. And if all those signatures match, all the cryptographic signatures all lock up, and boom, you have just proved atomically, not just that you have a valid Bitcoin, but that you have a specific valid Bitcoin that came from a specific entry point to the economy. It might be the first Bitcoin. It might have numismatic value because it was legendary for some reason. Just like if I have a gold, Morgan silver dollar, that's worth a certain amount of money. But if I have JP Morgan's Morgan silver dollar, that's worth more money if I can prove that it was his. And so Bitcoin allows you to do not just the atomic level of the asset, but it also, there's a whole history of its account that can't ever be tampered with either. And so there are people that pay more for what they call rare sats or rare coins. And those could be anything from, hey, this coin went through Silk Road and I can prove that it was there, or this, whatever other legendary thing in the history of Bitcoin. Those coins have their own provenance and they are valued higher as well.
Amazing. So when you are looking at the valuation of this, first of all, is it a security? Is it considered a security?
Bitcoin should not be. The reason is that a security is a completely different kind of financial instrument. For example, it needs to be issued by a group for the sake of the presumption of future profit. those sorts of things. So a security would be like stock, for example. There's various types of things that can be securities, but think of it as here, I'm going to give you money now and the expectation that we'll get more money back at some point in the future. That's a primary way to determine that something is a security. Also, the fact that the asset can be changed, sorry, I just hit my mic, that the asset can be changed by a specific group of people, meaning that it is centrally managed in some way, is another aspect of a security. Now, Bitcoin as a commodity, it's an emergent property. I would argue that fundamentally, no, Bitcoin is not a security. However, and this is a big and important caveat, that BTC, the asset that most people think of as Bitcoin, amid this Bitcoin civil war that happened between sort of 2015 and 17, were the main battleground years, there sort of emerged this process whereby the community, which is itself a really complex and nebulous concept here, the community decided that they have the authority as a collective to change fundamentals of the asset.
How did they decide that? How could they? They just decided that they were it, and therefore
how did the Bolsheviks take over Russia? It was like, hey guys, you're going to give us what we want, or we're going to kill everybody, and that's how the cookie crumbles. And so I actually make a lot of communist allusions to the way that this happened, because truly the politics behind it come from your sort of hardline left wing sort of social engineering, social organization. And it really worked like a general strike. Like, hey, we know it's your factory, but your factory can't run without us. And we're all in the parking lot demanding a raise. And that's kind of what happened in Bitcoin. So in 2017, after a lot of bickering about the right way to scale Bitcoin, one of the major groups, and the group that arguably won, or the group that controls the BTC ticker today, said, look, we want to undermine the history of digital signatures in Bitcoin. We want to replace those signatures with an extra layer of cryptography. So we want to compress those signatures into hashes, and then we'll put a hash of what's called witness data. So it's sort of an IOU. It's a promissory note of, we saw that there are signatures, but we're not going to give you the signatures. Now, to be fair, if your cryptography isn't broken, it is a guarantee that the signature was valid and does exist. Okay, so I don't want to overstate what they're stating. The problem is that the founding document of Bitcoin, the Bitcoin white paper, describes a Bitcoin as an unbroken chain of digital signatures. And what this does is specifically breaks it and replaces it with this IOU.
It breaks the continuance of the evidence of the actual thing that it was.
Exactly. Now, in this case, it's a perfect IOU. So this is sort of like, hey, if your cash, if you could guarantee that your dollar could always be redeemed for $1 of silver, is that good? Now, that guarantee in the case of banking is not a promise that has been kept. But because of the cryptography, this is a promise that can and will be kept forever. Big caveat, again, until they decide to change it again, right? Because if you can change the asset, then nothing is sacred about the asset. And then I would argue that it becomes a security after that point. So after August, what was it? No, I believe it was September 1st, 2017. This is when the segregated witness soft fork activation occurred on the chain. BTC had a mix of valid Bitcoins that are chains of digital signatures, and then it has a sub network wherein Bitcoins are transacted using segregated witness or replacing those signatures with hashed witness data of the existence of signatures. And I argue that SegWit coins, SegWit is the compression of segregated witness, SegWit coins, I argue, are not Bitcoins, and they are themselves a sort of security. I don't know who the party is that is responsible for having issued that security, because again, it was sort of a nebulous collective, but it's not a commodity anymore, because I can't change gold. No matter how much I hate gold or want to change it or want to turn it into something else, I can't do it. And the fact
that you did alchemized. Bitcoin, this was diluted, exactly. Essentially.
Correct. Yeah, I can turn it into electrum, I can mix it with lead and make it whatever else, but gold is still gold. I can still extract it right back out. There's my gold. The gold is still gold. With Bitcoin, that's the problem. Technology has a little bit of a social construct that's part of it. And it's just like anything else. Like, why is the dollar the most liquid asset in the world? And it's just because it's been the most liquid asset in the world for the longest amount of time. And the longer it goes, the more likely it is to be trusted. And it's the same thing with Bitcoin. But Bitcoin BTC is having these changes. That was 2017, 6-ish years ago, five and a half years ago. And then 2 years later, they added a new concept called Taproot, a whole other giant soft fork, big change, all this algorithmic stuff, compression of signatures, and all these other things. And so we're only like 2.5 years out from the last time there was a very deep and fundamental change to the BTC, the entire concept of what a Bitcoin is on the BTC chain. And so how can you argue that that's a commodity? It is essentially an asset with almost no provenance. It has less provenance than the Zimbabwean dollar. And that's not a positive point, in my opinion.
It's elusive and it's unstable, perhaps in the future. Whereas now let's go to BSV, right? So BSV is sort of like the sister. We'll call it the good child.
Sure.
How is that? How did it? First of all, a few questions. How is it that they had a capped amount? Who decided that there would be only so much? And then how did it divide, and who decided it would divide from that to the, let's say, good child?
Sure. So Satoshi Nakamoto hard-coded the limit into Bitcoin. So in 2009, early 2009, the software was released. He let people know, hey, anybody can mine it. It's a competitive process. If you look in the code, you'll see that there's only 21 million coins that'll ever exist. Here's the exact schedule on which they'll be issued, and a bunch of other like fundamentals of the system. One of the things that he did not even plan for really was this concept of having splits that never end. So there was, and in fact, he was asked about this and said, well, what if you have two chains that have race conditions? Like, which one's the valid Bitcoin? And his response was very, very simple. He said, there's only one chain. That's it. There's one valid Bitcoin, period. Now, this is another reason why I call it BTC is very clearly a security, is that it was the node operators in Bitcoin. These are the people whose job it is to orphan invalid chains, like kill it off. If it is not valid for any reason, kill it. They decided we're going to do a 2-chain experiment. Like, we're going to add a little bit of code that makes these things not orphan one another. So they will be permanent separation. Like, this is biblical reference. Like, we will divide the child. And so it's like, wow, that's not really good for anybody. And so all of a sudden we've got this divided network as of August 1st, 2017. And so then there was the Bitcoin Cash chain and the BTC Bitcoin Core chain. And it was decided, well, let's just see which one competes for hash power and price and usefulness, all these other things. Well, it's right there, it's already the community fundamentally decided to undermine a very basic principle of Bitcoin. Now, in the Bitcoin Cash community, there was the kind of hodgepodge of people. I was one of these people. About half of us said, okay, we have gotten away from this sort of social engineering, this kind of leftist Bolshevik, conquest chain over here. Can we restore Bitcoin? Like, let's just turn everything back on that was turned off. Let's turn off all the weird new stuff that had been added, and the Bitcoin Cash chain will turn into, over time, with provenance and trust, the original Bitcoin. We're going to restore Bitcoin because we think Bitcoin is good. Very simple narrative, pretty easy to do. Problem: half the community said, no, this is our chance to sort of remake Bitcoin in our image. We've got this Bitcoin Cash chain. We don't even have to fight with any of these crazy people anymore. So let's start adding new features. Let's start, like, we've learned a lot over the last, whatever it was at the time, 10, 11 years. And let's experiment harder. So you had essentially your conservatives versus your progressives over here in the Bitcoin Cash community. I was one of these conservatives. I believe that Bitcoin is fundamentally good and thought it deserved to be tried. And so we split again in late 2018. So Bitcoin Cash had another permanent split. And BSV is the chain that emerged in November of 2018. And then over the next 18 months from that period, basically the entire community focused on doing nothing but research and development into, okay, what is every little granular thing about Bitcoin that was turned off for security reasons or convenience reasons or whatever else. Let's slowly turn these things back on, make sure some, whatever edge case thing could break, let's make sure that it doesn't break. And then by the beginning of 2020, we did what's called the Genesis upgrade, which is kind of a funny term if you understand the meaning of the words Genesis and upgrade. But it was essentially a backward reversion or a rebirth of the original Bitcoin. So it was all original scripts turned back on, all original basically op codes and just little bits and pieces, like all this stuff, some of which had never been used in the wild. So there are things about Bitcoin that were turned off before ever. So it's like, imagine buying a new car and you like grab 3 buttons off your dashboard and you yank them out and throw them out the window and then drive the car for 12 years. And people say, what used to be there? And you say, I don't even know. I tore them out on day one. So that's the kind of stuff that we had to figure out and turn back on. And
so
now
what do those
BSV,
things do essentially? What were their functions? What were they? What was the point of putting them back in?
So some of them are a little bit like, like why was this here? So one of them is called OpVer, stands for version. So okay, what does that mean to have versions of Bitcoin, but all on the same database? Now people have theorized, like what could this even be about? And so imagine if you had a version of Bitcoin that was in consensus with the network, but that had properties that weren't part of the main chain, but could merge into the main chain with just a single like handshake transaction. So you could have certain other like let's say that, okay, coins on this either subchain or side chain or whatever you want to call it, each sat is the basket value of 1 unit of gold, 1 unit of silver, 1 unit of whatever. And so it is essentially a Bitcoin plus, but not a token and not a separate network. So they have this ability to sort of co-merge thing. Like
it's a subatomic particle. That's what you're trying to say. It's like a subatomic
essentially
portion of Bitcoin with a storage unit. But where does the valuation come in? Like you can say it's silver or gold, so to speak, but where is the value coming from?
So, I mean, value is a social construct. I mean, in a very practical sense, you could have a certain amount of gold that is serialized and then is held by a custodian that you trust, a company like StoneX or Brinks or something, the kind of company that's been around for 500 years and has never been robbed.
It's whatever everybody is basically deeming it to be as a collective. Yes. So if I were a trader,
that it's there, then for all intents and purposes, it must be, right?
Okay, because like I was going to say, as a trader of pearls, there's no standardization. So you could be a Tahitian pearl expert, and you could be, another pearl expert from somewhere else in the world, but nobody has a standardization of what this size and color of pearl really is worth. So how do we get to this? How do we know?
Plainly trade. I mean, like anything like that just needs to have a market established. Like it took Bitcoin about 3 years for anybody to actually use it for anything.
So you've done this with this new leg, with this sub leg. You guys have all done this.
Not specific. So I have not made like a subatomic, like that's very out there. It's something I would love to do. But
I have just the guy for you for that. I know cool. Somebody that might be able to actually lock that in the quantum.
very, very interesting. So one of the things that we have done, so my company Gorilla Pool, we sort of work like an ISP in the BSV economy, meaning that we serve data, we process data, and this kind of thing. So one of the things, we are working with a client who wants to issue real world assets, and he's an old gold, like gold industry guy. He runs like a mining company in Africa and things. He wants to issue gold on sats, and he's, oh yeah, I've got all the regulations figured out, I got all this stuff figured out, like what's the tech look like? And the tech is pretty easy because Bitcoin works like gold in a lot of ways. And so that kind of thing is actually pretty easy to do. It's also easy to issue any kind of asset. So digital cash, like if you can prove you have $1 million in a bank account and it never moves, and it's, the bank gives you an API to show exactly how much is in that account, and then you issue $1 million worth of tokens, then cool. Now they're liquid, valid tokens of dollars on chain, and everybody can use them. You immediately can facilitate trade with that asset. And so,
Okay,
yeah.
So speaking of trade, where are we headed with this future of the new web, of using this in a trade format? How do you see this being utilized in your children's future? What would it look like then?
So that's one of the other really cool things about Bitcoin. You and I have been talking primarily about money and like physical vestiges of value, right? Like I'm trading coins, or I'm trading paper cash, these things. Well, data itself is also money. It is also valuable. In fact, it is the only asset in the history of the world that becomes more valuable as more of it is created. Because the more data you have, the more you can learn about the other data around you, the more that you can infer by any single data point. If you know something else about 1 trillion data points that are like it, you can start to infer with greater certainty that this piece of data is very, very likely to behave like the other trillions of pieces of data that are similar to it. And so you begin to create economy of efficiency that we can't even calculate right now. So really, like, this is the biggest opportunity in Bitcoin. And it's something that almost nobody is working on. And again, is a specific thing that's really cool about BSV, is that we look at BSV and say, okay, if we have a monetized, distributed public ledger of value, meaning we have computers that can talk to each other basically instantly, but every byte of data can also have money attached to it. And it can be the Bitcoin asset, it can be the cash asset, it can be a gold sat, it can be, all these other things. Well, then it allows, plus the whole thing is optionally encrypted or decrypted by default, meaning, okay, so instead of using, an Amazon server to a Google server, and you have packets that are going in between, what if you had a Bitcoin node here and a Bitcoin node there, and you were transacting, you said a Bitcoin transaction and whatever those data packets were. So that can be your DM, it can be your Twitter post, it can be your, it can be anything that you would do over the internet can be done as a Bitcoin transaction, meaning that it can be proven that it happened, but you can also encrypt what was inside of whatever that thing was. And so you have better privacy, you have better connectivity, because your connectivity is economically incentivized at every level of the network. You have persistent data storage, where everybody has an economic incentive to keep data, because reselling that data is one of the major liquid aspects of your business model. And so what we have called this, people call it a bunch of different things. Some people call it the meta net. So sort of like the next generation internet. But really it's just like anything else. Like it should fade, the tech should fade into the background. And I expect my children to be able to transact value as easily as me and you might send a text message. That all of those things, they integrate into each other, because money and data are actually the same thing. And Bitcoin's the tool that allows us to utilize them. And that is a severely misunderstood and underutilized concept within this money. But truly, data is more valuable than anything else in the global economy today. So we send around a few $1 trillion worth of dollar value around the world. But if you take the aggregate and collective value of all of the data of the interconnected people on the internet, there's exponentially more value that's created every day and transacted, but it's not measured by anybody. It's just like it's lost as exhaust, right? So when you consume anything using the current internet like ad model, your data is being scraped, it's being sold to government agencies and weird advertising agencies. And if you and I start talking about Nikes or something, all of a sudden we're going to start seeing ads for Nikes on Instagram and over the next 24 hours. And we don't even know why, but somehow we are being recorded and modeled by all of these agencies that want our data for their own purposes. And there's no way for us to monetize them or utilize them. But with Bitcoin, because you can do sub-cent valuations of every single piece of data in existence, you could control that. You could sell that for a 10,000th of a penny. Like the fact that I'm interested in a new Nike shoe is at best a $150 or $200 concept. That's the whole economy of my desire for a pair of Nikes, right? And so it's pretty hard to break that down and separate that into lots of little things using dollars because the rails are inefficient. But with Bitcoin, the rails are so efficient that you could literally pay out thousands of people that are involved in that transaction. That's everyone from the cow that needs to be killed in order to make the leather to the shipping company or whoever delivers the fuel to the ship or the truck or whatever else, or the plastic that goes into the shoelaces. Like all of those little things are included in that transaction, and you can pay all of them instantly and constantly, and it never needs to slow down. And so with this
Bitcoin, trillions of commerce. It's
an incredible amount of commerce, but it's all happening in that like sub-dollar zone in all these little pieces. And so we decide we can't harness it, right? It's like light bulbs give off heat, or they used to. And and that was just lost energy. But like heat is super valuable. And so if you can harness all that heat somewhere, like that allows you to liberate it. And this is actually happening in Bitcoin mining too, is that they've realized, hey, if there's exhaust heat, we can capture that, use it to spin a turbine, and we can mine Bitcoins with it. Now we've just monetized, like cracks in the earth are now monetizable because of Bitcoin. This is one of the very few ways that Bitcoin has monetized things that used to just be lost energy. So you get these people talking about like mining on volcanoes or mining with flare gas and these kind of things. So it's one very small specialization where we've seen Bitcoin succeed, but it can be like that for everything.
You're recycling energy in the process, and you're giving value to the recycling process is what you're saying. Mm-hmm. And also in this case, if we took one of my songs, if we took some of my music, how could let's use that as an example. How could I sell my 99-cent song in a different way that would change or fit this model?
Sure. So one of my business partners has an app on BSV. It's called Jamify. It works kind of like Spotify, which is what the name should hopefully encourage you to think about without getting sued by the Spotify people, of course. But
we love Spotify.
Spotify's great. I'm a huge fan. I'm a daily user, but I think about that cost. I don't even know what is it? $9.99 or something for. So you have to pay Spotify monthly, right? Because maybe I only like 20 songs, but I can't just pay for 20 songs because each song would be 99 cents. And it's not like, like it's again, and it's an accounting problem. And right. iTunes started with, hey, we can sell songs for 99 cents, but they stopped doing it that way because of credit card fees and chargebacks and all these other things. Well, if you read the Bitcoin white paper, the opening paragraph talks about the problems of chargebacks and credit card fees and all these things make it that micro commerce can't happen. Well, imagine if your cost of doing business was a 10,000th of a penny. I mean, that means that you can sell a billion things for a 1,000th of a penny, and you're still like your cost of friction is still incalculably low. And so Bitcoin at scale allows you to sell. It allows you to sell your song for a 1/9 of a cent to everybody on Earth, and it can be distributed over that network. They can even listen to half the song and say, you know what, I don't like this song. Click return, and you'll get back your 4/5 of a cent back that they didn't listen to, because you can make change in a sub-cent valuation on things. And
Wow, that's crazy. And is that on blockchain? Is it on a blockchain, or is it?
100%. So it is a perfect example of, if you just have a distributed ledger, it's economically, everybody's connected, like the fees remain incredibly low. I can pay you a tenth of a penny or a hundredth of a penny back and forth, basically infinitely. And we think about these things, obviously, like these numbers are, to people like us, a rounding error, right? Like at the end of the day, if I made $500, do I really care if it cost me a hundredth of a penny or a thousandth of a penny? Like I'm not even doing that math in my accounting. But there's about 4 billion people on this planet that are living on like $5 a month. And so
Right.
for them, the ability to do lots of sub-cent commerce is instantly putting food on their table. So, go to Vietnam, go to the Philippines, go to half of Africa, go to half of South America. And these people, they would love to pass you a handful of food for 5 cents, but they can't do that with any part of the global economy today, because Visa and MasterCard and all the wire companies and Swift and all these things, they have $10 minimums and all these kind of things. So we have our first world economy and our first world problems with the banking system and all these other things. But when you go to the third world, their lives would improve exponentially if they all of a sudden had a way to transact with each other electronically in a way that makes sense to them. So imagine tokenizing the currencies of every country on Earth and allowing them to transact value in a way that makes sense to them, but this constant digital exchange of value. So I'm in, the Philippines, and I'm transacting Philippine pesos, and a churro might cost me 10 cents American. And so, like all these little units, like they seem trivial to us, but these values are a family dinner for billions of people. And so there's a ton of extra value there, and not to mention the spillover benefits of how many of those 4 billion people would become world-class entrepreneurs if they had access to the global economy as well. So, we talk about Silicon
You're raising
Valley
value
or,
of humanity.
yeah,
You're giving
absolutely.
humanity an opportunity to express itself in a whole, as a unit versus
Yeah.
divided legs.
How many guys like Steve Jobs or Elon Musk exist in that 4 billion people that we can't connect to? And if we connected to them, how many of them would rise to, be the greatest inventor of our generation? But sorry, you were born in the wrong place, and you're going to herd a yak around forever, and that's your legacy.
So
So
let's go
there's
back to the division of this, because we were talking about where your children would see this future, but
yeah.
Just to reiterate to people, there is a divide, and the BTC side is more the corrupted side, or the original old corrupted side, and then the BSV side is actually what you're talking about here. It's the model of transacting. It's sort of got cleansed under the
Yeah.
the goodwill effect, and it's brand new. So
Essentially.
how does you're involved at the top of that? Obviously, you're in with the people that are putting that together. Yes.
Yeah, I run a major mining pool and a research and development firm, and I work
That's Gorilla Pool.
Gorilla
and
Pool. Yep.
GorillaPool.com.
Yep.
And you're available for consultation. We might as well put that out there right out front, because people can set a consultation with you and have a consultation about how they would get into this and
Yep.
and begin mining and so on. So, but how would our world, let's say that takes off on the good side, what happens to the other side? What happens to the side that's corrupted?
I mean, just like anything else, there's going to be costs and benefits to everything. Like the majority of people that are involved in any blockchain today are there primarily to raise money and to raise the value of their portfolio. And that's not a criticism necessarily. I understand why that's a good thing. Like it is a good fintech tool. It does improve the processes that Silicon Valley established over the last 30 years. And, there's lots of stuff there too. Um, you have two basic groups. You have your BTC maximalist types that are like, look, blockchains are only for the storage of value. It's just to be a widely distributed, unconfiscatable asset that just goes up in value forever because it's scarce and because essentially a popular meme is only just going to get more popular as it accrues more value. It's like this concept of like Pareto distribution, but as it pertains to wealth, which is kind of true. We see the same thing in, dollars versus like BRICS dollars or whatever they're going to call them. It's like you're going to have to raise the reputations of, Russia, China, Brazil, like whoever's involved in BRICS, in order for that BRICS dollar to become more trusted than the US dollar around the world. And that's going to take generations. Like for another 100 years, there's just going to be a lot of people on earth that are like, man, I just don't want to do business in Russian or Chinese money. I don't want to do it. And it's the same thing. That's how they feel about the dollar, but they begrudgingly do it anyways because liquidity, right? And so they presume that because BTC Bitcoin is the number one asset in the cryptocurrency economy, that it's just that everything is going to absorb value that direction. Everything else is going to taper off relative to its price in BTC. And it's just inevitable. And they'll cite all kinds of macroeconomic principles like Gresham's law and whatever else. But it's it's incongruent for a couple of reasons. And the primary one is that Bitcoin is a designed commodity. And it was given economic balance through a lot of very careful planning by the creator. And it has now been tinkered with. Its economics have been fundamentally undermined in an increasing number of ways over time. And as anybody knows, what anybody can know from a macroeconomic standpoint is that the more you tinker with an economy, with its economic principles, the more it's going to get out of balance, and it is going to, in a very out of balance way, benefit some people, and it's going to be to the detriment to others. And at a certain point, too many of those others feel marginalized, and they're going to try to take it from the people that benefited in a lopsided fashion. This is why we have revolutions. This is why we have, most countries have a new constitution every 20 years. And, the prime minister or whoever, the king and queen, like they get their heads cut off and everybody cheers and great. Now we're all better and free. And then it's just going to happen again in another 20 years. Now, this isn't obvious to Americans because we have been very blessed to live in a place that has been basically stable. We have all kinds of our own problems, but I'm not really worried that anybody's going to kick the White House door down, kill the president, and hey, we've got a new guy, and it's whatever. Like our borders haven't shifted in a very long time. Nobody's invaded our country since the War of 1812. so none of us have this sort of built-in like there are consequences to the bad decisions we make because we've been heavily insulated from them. And so you see this lopsided number of Americans who are BTC maximalists who are like, yeah, man, we're the users of the network. We govern this thing. The changes we make are good because we've come to consensus with each other. And, and we're the intellectual elite. How could we be wrong? We were smart enough to get into Bitcoin early. And therefore we are now very wealthy too. So not only did I feel right based on my rhetoric, I feel right because my decisions have made me richer. And so it's kind of this compounding, egotistical, like I can never be wrong, which is funny because so many of them will spend forever talking about Jerome Powell or whoever else at the Fed or all these people like, oh, they're hubris. They think they can change the interest rates and pull the puppet strings of the economy. And I look at them and say, here's
the mirror.
You and your group of fools are pulling the puppet strings of your economy, and you don't think there's any consequences for your actions either. And it's so massively unhealthy, but it's Westerners in general and Americans in specific have this sort of I can't ever lose mentality about their own decision making. Everybody else is a fool. Everybody else is they're unhealthy. They're this foolish foreigner rube thing, but I'm a genius. And the problem is that it keeps self-validating. It's really hard to tell somebody who became wealthy by their own decisions that their decisions were foolish. So um but that's a problem that we have doubly as Americans, because we've had a very foolish economy for basically most of my lifetime. Um, but we keep getting wealthier generally. We've got these little dips. I would argue we've been in a recession for a few years here, but
But where do you see the BSV side going? Does at some point, does it all come under a good umbrella, or is BSV just leading the way toward a better commerce, and therefore that will eventually bleed over and take over? How does this change for the better?
The flip side of that whole thing, the hey, I can do nothing and hold this asset and just get richer forever. Well, the opposite of that is hard work. Now, for me, I'm an entrepreneur. If somebody gave me $1 billion and said, Kurt, here you go, you can retire anywhere in the world, do anything you want for the rest of your life, I'd build new businesses. So I don't like to rest. I don't like the idea of cocktails on the beach. When I have a week off with my wife and kids who I love dearly, I'll sit on my laptop and be like, man, I've really been trying to get this new website put together, and I finally have some time to think about it. And
I love your generation. I love it.
and it's just a mentality. It's something that is innate in me that I don't want to just waste time, And so BSV is a lot like that. It's a business tool primarily. It is a way to reduce friction from transactions and value and data. Cool.
How do you keep it clean going forward? How does it stay clean? It's essentially clean is what you're saying right now, but how does it stay clean?
It's competition. So BSV has all kinds of its own problems. And they're mostly, it's just like anything else. There's a lot of people that spend a lot of time theorizing about how BSV should be used in the economy. And it's like I said at the beginning, if like a business professor who's never run a company is not somebody that I would spend any time with. Like, it's great. Like, earning an MBA is a good thing. I'm not criticizing MBAs, but I am a lot more impressed by the kind of person that dropped out of college as a freshman because they started a business and the business took priority over their certificate of completed education, and then grew their company into something. Like, that person has practical experience in business, and that's the people that need to come to the BSV economy in order for BSV to succeed. So if we are that, whatever it is, 1,000 people who just want to talk about the macroeconomic principles on our key differentiators between the BTC people and the BSV people, we are going to lose. Now, we will win and the world will win, even if we only get 5, 6, 7 entrepreneurs that actually disrupt some aspect of the real economy using the technology that only exists in BSV. And so I don't know what those things are.
That sounds like a cool challenge.
It is.
Bring it on. Let's go.
With how many people there are on Earth, I would like to think I could find 5 people that might have a globally significant business idea that could make this happen. But that's really the truth of it. And it's like, somebody like Steve Jobs. He was adopted. He was physically ill for his whole life. He had all kinds of things going against him. But he had a vision and he had an extreme work ethic. And that man changed the world. He literally gave people the tools to connect their computers, the music industry, the telephone communications industry, like all of these things. It's one of the most valuable human beings that ever lived. And it was just simply because he just decided to. He got a couple of friends together and built an empire that has now persisted and done nothing but grow even after his death, because his vision and his work ethic were so strong and so influential.
Well, let me
And
ask you, how do people come into this community, this ecosystem? How do they, besides buying BSV, let's say, how do they commune with you?
I think there's a lot of good ways. There's a lot of very fun little things to do that are a little bit like proof of concept. So like there's onesatordinals.com, which is its own token protocol and thing. So people can create their own assets. Like my good friend and one of my business partners, Luke, created a token that's called GM, which is good morning. And so but he also created a Discord community. And what this Discord community does is it talks about, hey, what are some things that we can solve with token technology? But once a day, every 24 hours, you can go into the GM channel and you type GM to everybody in the room, and then it will send you GM tokens to your wallet. And so you receive a calculable value for your GM. And now it's something that everybody does. I find myself doing. I wake up, I'll look at my phone, I'm awake for 3 minutes, like do my thing, start making my coffee, like pull my phone out, go into the Discord, GM everybody, and then cha-ching, you've received your GM tokens for the day. And like, and these kind of, it's like, so what is GM worth? In dollars, it might be nothing. It might never be anything, but it can be a cute thing that I send to my, I could gift them to my grandchildren at some point. Like, here you go, kids. Here's all my GMs. Good morning to you guys. And it's just like, some things of value are not measured in dollars, but they're measured in like, wow,
goodwill.
Dad said GM every day for 25 years in this thing. And like, and here's proof of every time he did it. Like, that's kind of cute. It's as cool as, giving them, my leather jacket that I wore for 20 years or something, And so it's like, that's a very small thing. So if you want to get involved in community and actually transact on the chain and see like, oh, wow, that really was very easy and it's cute and whatever else, like, so you got stuff like that. You also have things like, there are some serious startups that are doing some really cool things. One of my favorites is called CertaHash. Now, because payments are very cheap, what they have done is take in a cybersecurity scenario, when you have a company that has a large amount of distributed assets, so like a insurance company is going to give laptops to lots of people that just go out, right? Well, how do you keep track of all those assets? How do you stop them from making bad cybersecurity decisions? So, salesman Dave navigates to a seedy website, downloads malware. Now he sends an email back into the main system, and now the malware is on the main computer inside the firewall, right? That's a major problem. It's a huge security risk. Now, the way that any malware works or any kind of hacker works is as soon as they steal your information, they go into the general log of the main server and they erase the record of whatever they changed in the system. This happens all the time. What CertaHash does is every time there's any change to the log, it sends the state of that log to the blockchain.
Oh, so, I need that.
Yep. Change.
I need that.
And if anything ever reverts, if all of a sudden the log goes backwards, which a log should never go backwards in this scenario, only when something bad happens, and every crook is going to try to make it go backwards when they do something bad, immediately that becomes available. It says, hey, somebody just pushed the log backwards. But because you're not trusting the log to verify itself, there is a secondary validator that either they didn't know exists, but even if they did know that it exists, they can't make a blockchain go backwards, then boom, you haven't necessarily caught the criminal, but the person in charge of security at the company instantly gets an alert, something very bad has just happened. Instead of, 18 months later, like, hey, by the way, all of your customers' data has been sold on the dark web, and now you have a, $200 million class action settlement coming and, all these other things, which happens all the time. It happens to your favorite retailers. It happened to Experian 10 years ago. So some of the most secure companies in the world get hacked. Now, the beauty of CertaHash is that by using BSV, you can write 1 million logs a day to the blockchain and they cost you pennies. And so your cost of that added security is essentially zero, but the service, the amount of money that you're potentially saving in the economy, is to the tune of tens or hundreds of millions of dollars a year. And so that's economic improvement in a very real way. And it's a lot more serious than the GM tokens, but the GM tokens and your multi-million or multi-billion dollar cybersecurity enhancement feature both exist on the same network in perfect harmony with each other.
This is brilliant. This is really a positive uplift. I know a lot of people are going to get a lot out of this. Now let's take it a step forward. You were talking about nodes, Terra nodes. Explain Terra node versus node.
So a Bitcoin node is a specialized piece of software. It's a computer that does a lot of things. When Satoshi Nakamoto created the first Bitcoin node, it was your wallet. It was the broadcasting apparatus of the network. So it's how you send data across your peer-to-peer network to other nodes. It has a whole receiving apparatus. It had the ability to propose blocks to the blockchain, like saying, hey, I've reconciled all these transactions from the last 10 minutes. Will you build on my block of reconciled transactions? So then it's got all these functions that are validating transactions, validating data, and all these things happen in a single piece of software at the time, typically on laptops. So generally low power computers, but doing lots and lots of processes. And that's cool when your network has a few dozen or a few hundred users for the first, 3, 4, 5 years of Bitcoin. It's just kind of a handful of nerds using it. So the network doesn't really have a lot of bandwidth requirements. And that's all well and good. When more and more people came to Bitcoin, this is actually what started the Bitcoin Civil War, was debates over how to scale. You had the people who really liked their laptop and they're like, well, I don't want to have to upgrade my computer to continue to run my node. Maybe we should just throttle the entire network's traffic to make sure that my laptop is always sufficient for global traffic. And which again is central planning of an economy. Like, let's only let a certain amount of people do business so that I always have a job. Like, that's sounds communist again, but
is the IMF involved in Bitcoin? Does it?
Oh, absolutely. At least tangentially. I mean, lots of people from the IMF are involved as individuals for sure.
On the BTC side or on the
absolutely.
BSV side?
The BTC side. Big money, big investment. If you look at the era from 2013 to like 15 or 16, you had all kinds of people from the World Bank and from companies like New York Life and MasterCard and all these people that are sort of tangentially part of like the central banking system generally, or the global monetary system generally. They'd be part of these like surrogate funds. And I think what a lot of people don't understand about like venture capital, people think of like Sequoia Capital, for example, like, oh, cool, yeah, they're from San Francisco, they're a bunch of cool guys that invest in these things. It's like, yeah, but their capital is actually sovereign wealth funds from these entities who are, you would struggle to understand, even if I explained, not you necessarily, but the average person would be like, wait, how did money get into this bucket? Very, very complicated stuff. But yes, a lot of old world, like power structure money got into Bitcoin and really caused the Bitcoin Civil War in a lot of ways. And we're still living with the consequences of it. And I think there's still the primary influence on a lot of this, like, no, Bitcoin shouldn't scale. Bitcoin should just be this thing that you hold and trade. Like, don't disrupt payments, please. It's a little bit controlled opposition. And then part of the price of Bitcoin going up, you being rewarded for not disrupting the payments industry, is that you keep getting wealthy. And so then these people become foot soldiers and whatever else. So
well, we've talked about a lot of happy things in this, and I still want to go over some more happy things and some things where they sit in the balance of where are we going from here. But let's just touch on this for the audience. There's been a lot of nefarious trading. There's been things like the Clinton wallet. There's been human trafficking that's been funded by the nefarious side of different cryptocurrencies and things like that.
Yep.
Can you speak to that with your knowledge base?
If you'd like to hear the rest of this interview, please go to part 2 of this very special interview, The Truth About Bitcoin. And you can find that on the Making Life Brighter YouTube channel, on Rumble. You'll even find it on Facebook and on Twitter. And you will hear Kurt's answer and much, much, much more. We're only touching the surface here at this halfway point. So please check out part 2 and share, because this information is not only historical, but it's definitely food for thought. And it's something that may help many different people in the future differentiate what is and what's not legitimate. Thank you for listening, and I hope you make some